September 12, 1943, William Campbell of Vincennes, Route 1, has received a card from his son, Private Billy Campbell, a prisoner in Philippines Military Prison Camp No. 1. The card is of similar type to those received by other families recently whose sons are in that prison camp of the Japanese. Noted on the card were that his health was good, he was under treatment, he was well, and regards to sister. The sister is Miss Kermit Biddle of Vincennes Route 3, and Estill Campbell of Vincennes is a brother of the soldier prisoner. William Campbell was taken prisoner at the Battle of Corregidor, fought on the 5th and 6th of May of 1942. The island Bataan of Corregidor, with its network of tunnels and formidable array of defensible armaments, along with the fortifications across the entrance to Manila Bay, was the remaining obstacle to the Japanese 14th Army of Lieutenant General Masahiro Hama. Hama had to take Corregidor because as long as the island remained in American hands, the Japanese would be denied the use of Manila Bay and its harbor. The U.S. Army eventually recaptured the island in 1945. Corregidor, officially named Fort Mills, was the largest of the 4 fortified islands protecting the mouth of Manila Bay and had been fortified prior to World War I with powerful coastal artillery. The tadpole-shaped island was 3.5 miles from Bataan. The widest and elevated area, known as Topside, had most of the fort's 56 coastal defense guns and mortars and 28 3-inch aircraft guns, besides the 3-story, mile-long barracks. Middle side was a small plateau containing battery positions as well as barracks. Bottom side was the lower area where a dock area and civilian town of San Jose were located besides the controlled mine complex. Americans called it the Rock or even the Gibraltar of the East. From December 29, 1941 until January 6, 1942, the Japanese airplanes bombed the island, destroying half the wooden structures on the island and the electric train system and the water distribution system. Everyone was put on half rations. With 15,000 people on the island, there was food for only 6 to 8 weeks. On April 8, the 60th Coast Artillery, commanded by Theodore M. Chase, withdrew from Bataan to Corregidor. On March 12th, under cover of darkness, MacArthur was evacuated from Corregidor using the PT boats bound for Mindanao. From where he was eventually flown to Australia, he left Wainwright in command in the Philippines. The defenders were living on about 30 ounces of food per day. Drinking water was distributed only twice a day, but the constant bombing and shelling often interrupted distribution of rations. When the bombardment killed horses of the cavalry, the men would drag the carcass down to the mess hall for consumption. The continued lack of proper diet created problems for Corregidor garrison as men weakened. On May 5th, only 3 155mm guns on Corregidor were operational. Japanese propaganda to its home population repeatedly declared in this period that the Corregidor was about to fall, followed by weeks of silence when it did not happen. Imperial General Headquarters finally declared that the resistance was becoming a serious embarrassment. On May 5th, Japanese forces led by Major General Kiro Takagachi boarded landing craft and barrages and headed for the final assault in Corregidor. Shortly before midnight, intense shelling struck the beaches between North Point and Cavalry Point. The initial landing of 790 Japanese soldiers quickly bogged down by fierce resistance from the American and Filipino defenders, whose 37mm artillery exacted a heavy toll on the invasion fleet. It was a bloodbath. Observers at Cabin described the scene as a spectacle that confounded the imagination, surpassing in grim horror anything we had ever seen. The aftermath. On May 23rd, the Japanese prisoners on Corregidor was marched to the South Mine Wharf and boarded on 3 ships anchored in San Jose Bay. After landing in Manila, the Philippines were offloaded into the dock, where the Americans were paraded down Dewey Boulevard to Old Bilibid Prison and onward to Cabanatuan Camp No. 3. At the end of July, the Angels of Bataan nurses were sent to the Santo Tomas Intermittent Camp. Parents received message from him in Jap broadcast. Long months of silence in which no words of any kind had come from William Campbell Jr., who was captured by the Japanese at the capture of Corregidor almost 2.5 years ago, come to an end this week when a telegram from the War Department notified his father, who lives on Vincennes Route 3, that a message from Billy had been used in a Japanese propaganda broadcast. The broadcast was on September 18th. There also were received Here 3 letters from civilians, 2 in California and 1 in Idaho, who had heard the broadcast. Billy was a Coast Guardsman and had been in the Philippines since April 1941. A few months after the fall of those islands, relatives received official word from the War Department that he was held as a prisoner of war, and later received a brief card from him. At that time, he was held at a prison camp in the Philippines. Later, it appears he was transferred to a prison camp in the Japanese island chain. The message in the broadcast was brief but reassuring. Esto Campbell of Vincennes is a brother, and Miss Kermit Biddle of Vincennes Route 3 is a sister of the war prisoner. April 30th, 1948, it was reported Billy Campbell, survivor of the Death March, dies day after his father succumbs. Billy Campbell, 24, World War II veteran captured by the Japanese in the fall of Bataan, and one of the survivors of the terrible Death March, died in the University Hospital at Ann Arbor, Michigan. Billy's father, William Campbell, of near Frichteon, died Wednesday, and a double funeral for the father and son will be held from Brockman Chapel. Funeral services for the father had been set for at the Donaldson and Richardson Funeral Home at Monroe City. But news of the son's death has changed these plans, and the funeral will be posted so that the two can be buried together. Father's body will remain in Monroe City Funeral Home, then it will be brought here to Vincennes. Time of the arrival here of the son's body was not known, as doctors at Ann Arbor, Michigan Hospital planned an autopsy to determine, if possible, the cause of the young soldier's death. Billy was in a Japanese prison camp for 40 months. He was discharged from the service in 1945, but re-enlisted in 1946 and was stationed in Chinook Field. After his liberation from the prison camp, the boy had complained of severe pain in his head at intermittent periods. The severity of these pains kept increasing, and he was recently transferred from Chinook Field to the University Hospital, where he died. Billy was born in Harrison Township, March 18, 1924. He was the son of late William and Mina Kuntz Campbell. He attended the Frichteon schools, but entered the service before graduating from the school. Sam Harris, past VFW commander who lost 2 sons in the war, recalled that young Campbell was a close friend of his son Charles and was with him when he died in a Japanese prison. Young Campbell and Harris enlisted together. Charles was captured on the Corregidor. They were reunited in prison after taking part in a terrible death march. It was found that Billy Campbell died from a brain tumor. Monday, May 3rd, 1948. Funerals held for father and his soldier son. Double funeral services for Staff Sergeant Billy Campbell and his father, William Campbell, were conducted from the Brockman Chapel Monday afternoon at 2:30. Services were conducted by Reverend William Myers and Reverend Gordon Leach.